President Trump has been impeached. It sounds like a big deal, and it is. But why did it happen and what does it mean? This video will cut through the details, distractions and dramas and answer those questions for you. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Impeachment. Was there a quid pro quo?
It all started with that phone call in July last year between President Trump and Ukraine's newly elected President Zelensky. It was supposed to be a mutual pat on the back, a welcome from President Trump and some warm words. But pretty soon the president made clear there was something on his mind. After the niceties were out of the way, came this.
I would like you to do us a favor.
It was the turning point, the moment, the Democrats say, when President Trump crossed the line between presidential niceties and doing something illegal by asking a foreign power for a favor. And it wasn't just any favor. He wanted him to launch an investigation into his political rival, Joe Biden. Because that's what this is all about, the age-old fight between Republicans and Democrats. Trump in the red corner and Biden in the blue. Remember him? He was President Obama's right-hand man and now standing to become the Democratic candidate to go up against President Trump himself in the 2020 election. Okay, back to the call.
There's a lot of talk about Biden's son.
Hold on, what's Biden's son got to do with this? Well, Hunter Biden is linked to Ukraine because he had taken a well-paid job with a Ukrainian energy firm that was accused of being corrupt.
There's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that, so whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution, so if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me.
What's Trump talking about? Well, he claims that Joe Biden tried to get Ukraine's top prosecutor, a powerful lawyer called Viktor Shokin, sacked because he was investigating the company that his son Hunter worked for. Essentially, President Trump thought Joe Biden was being corrupt because he was using his powerful political position to help his son. Not that Donald Trump had any evidence of that, by the way. In fact, the evidence points in the opposite direction. Lots of countries, even the UK, were calling for the lawyer Shokin to be sacked, precisely because he refused to investigate corruption. So President Trump's allegations don't seem to stack up. But the truth, say the Democrats, is that President Trump was asking, in not so subtle terms, for President Zelensky to dig for dirt on Joe Biden, dirt that would harm him if it came to light ahead of the 2020 election. But unlucky for President Trump, asking a foreign leader to interfere in US politics, in this case to potentially affect the outcome of an election, is a no-go. Can't do it. The other problem for Donald Trump is that lots of people were listening in on that call, as is procedure when the president talks to other world leaders. They heard his attempts to persuade President Zelensky and were alarmed. One unnamed aide who was told about the call was so shocked he blew the whistle, alleging that not only had President Trump abused the power of his office for his own political gain, but that the transcript of the call was then squirreled away on a secret server in the White House with strict access for just the select few. What the Democrats have since called
The cover-up.
But it didn't end there. Oh no, the next bombshell was about to drop. A month before the July call with Zelensky, it emerged that President Trump had ordered nearly $400 million worth of military aid to Ukraine to be put on hold. He says because he wasn't convinced that Ukraine was doing enough to fight corruption within the country. In fact, he says everything he's ever done with Ukraine, this whole saga, has all been about fighting corruption.
I'm only interested in corruption. Everything to me is about corruption. We're investigating corruption.
Yet how many times did he actually use the word corruption on that phone call with President Zelensky back in July? Yep, you guessed it. Not once, not a single time. The Democrats say instead that President Trump held back the money as a bargaining tool to try and force Ukraine to do what he wanted. They called it the quid pro quo, which is an old Latin term meaning this for that. In other words, you investigate Joe Biden for me, and I'll give you $400 million worth of military aid. Oh, no, says President Trump. He insists the call was perfect.
That call was perfect. Perfect.
The problem is, after the whistleblower came forward, the Democrats decided to launch an investigation. Then a ton of current and former White House aides and military officials came out of the woodwork. Lots of witnesses came and went and gave evidence, and between them they made clear it wasn't just one isolated phone call. The call was in fact just one part of a months-long scheme to put pressure on Ukraine to do President Trump's bidding.
I found the July 25th phone call unusual because, in contrast to other presidential calls I had observed, it involved discussion of what appeared to be a domestic political matter.
Was there a quid pro quo?
The answer is yes.
Have you ever seen another example of foreign aid conditioned on the personal or political interests of the President of the United States?
No, Mr. Goldman, I've not.
One man who didn't testify, but who almost everyone said was at the center of this scandal, was one Rudy Giuliani.
The former mayor of New York, who was praised for his strong leadership in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks.
He then went on to become the president's personal lawyer.
As the pieces of the Ukraine puzzle came together, it turns out Giuliani had even gone on TV months before this whole scandal erupted and openly bragged about visiting Ukraine to force them to open an investigation into what he called the corrupt Bidens.
It's a case that is crying out to be investigated. If it doesn't get investigated, we just don't have equal justice in this country.
It wasn't hard for the Democrats to gather the evidence. All the witnesses who'd appeared backed up what the whistleblower had said. And President Trump himself helpfully appeared on the White House lawn and happily repeated in public what he'd been accused of doing in private. Go figure.
President Zelensky, if it were me, I would recommend that they start an investigation into the Bidens, because nobody has any doubt that they weren't crooked. That was a crooked deal, 100%.
So it was no surprise the Democrats were quick to bring charges, so-called articles of impeachment against President Trump.
They allege that first he abused the power of his office by pressuring Ukraine to meddle in the 2020 election by launching an investigation into his political rival Joe Biden. And second, that he obstructed Congress in its impeachment investigations by refusing to hand over any documents and blocking key witnesses from giving evidence.
With the Democrats in charge of the House of Representatives, it was a no-brainer that they would vote in favor of the impeachment charges, and they did just that.
On the night of December 19th, in that building there behind me, Donald Trump became just the third president in US history to be impeached.
As we know, Donald Trump likes accolades and headlines, but coming third on the podium for this one was a dubious honour for sure.
So now you know why President Trump got himself impeached. But what happens next? Will he stop being president? Will he get slung out of the Oval Office? Will anything actually happen to him at all? Well, most likely no. And if you think that's unfair, well, so too do the Democrats. But there's not much they can do about it, because the president's fate now lies in the hands of the Senate. And 2/3 of senators over there will need to vote in favour for President Trump to be removed from office. But guess what? Because the Senate is majority controlled by Republicans, there is practically no chance on earth that they will vote to sling their president out.
It's sure to get ugly, with Trump's lawyers already attacking the trial as rigged and flimsy, calling for the charges against the president to be dropped immediately. Really, the only route to removing him from office now
is that the White House could be forced to release more juicy documents and emails, and further witnesses could be called to testify in the trial. And if that happens, that may prove very damaging for Donald Trump and very difficult for Republican senators to ignore. It's a case of watch this space.